Don't you want your granddaughter to have a better life? My daughter asked. She wasn't ready for the answer that ended everything. My name is Thomas. I'm 62 years old, retired, widowed, and apparently the proud owner of a face that causes certain people to see dollar signs. Not everyone, just the dangerous ones, the charming ones, the ones who smile while mentally measuring your furniture. My wife Rebecca used to say I was too suspicious. Thomas, not everyone is running a scam. Statistically, somebody is. That usually earned me a pillow thrown across the room. God, I miss that woman. 3 years after losing her, I'd settled into a routine. Not because I loved routine, because routine is what keeps you from sitting in a dark room, talking to old photographs, like you've joined some Victorian ghost novel. I woke up at 6. Coffee, garden, newspaper. Complain about my knees. Pretend not to enjoy complaining about my knees. Retirement wasn't exciting, but it was peaceful, and peace becomes very valuable after you've spent 40 years working. I wasn't wealthy. Let's get that out of the way. Nobody was parking yachts in my backyard. Nobody was naming university buildings after me. I simply did something that has apparently become revolutionary. I saved money. That's it. I worked. I saved. I avoided stupid debt. The financial equivalent of eating vegetables. Boring while you're doing it. Helpful later. My son Jeremy understood that. My daughter Sarah used to understand it too. Used to? That's the important phrase. Sarah wasn't always the person she became. Growing up, she was responsible, smart, kind. The kind of kid who returned extra change if a cashier made a mistake. Then she met Jason. Now, before anyone accuses me of hating the man immediately, let me clarify. I absolutely hated him immediately. Not openly. Not irrationally. Just internally. Like heartburn. The first time we met, he arrived wearing a suit that cost more than my first car. He had perfect hair, perfect teeth, perfect confidence. The kind of confidence that always makes me wonder what paperwork I should be checking. He shook my hand and said, "I've heard so much about you," which is a sentence I automatically distrust. Nobody ever hears that much about me. I grow tomatoes. I pay taxes. I'm not Batman. Then he explained he worked in real estate. Of course he did. If he told me he also sold cryptocurrency and motivational seminars, I would have achieved sarcasm-induced cardiac arrest right there. But Sarah loved him, so I smiled. I nodded. I behaved. Because that's what parents do. We see red flags. Then we spend years hoping they're decorative. The trouble started on a Saturday afternoon. I was outside trimming hedges when their SUV rolled into my driveway. Immediately suspicious. Nobody under 40 voluntarily visits anymore. Visits require motives. Sarah jumped out first. Jason followed, carrying a fancy bakery box. And right there I knew. People don't bring pastries because they love you. People bring pastries because they're about to ask for something expensive. I turned off the hedge trimmer. Either you're here to help with yard work or you're about to ask for money. Sarah laughed. Jason laughed harder, which somehow made it worse. Inside, I made coffee. Nobody touched the pastries. Another bad sign. The pastries weren't a gift. They were bait, like throwing breadcrumbs before demanding ownership of the duck pond. We sat around the kitchen table, the same table where Sarah had done homework, the same table where Rebecca had balanced checkbooks, the same table where I was apparently about to be emotionally mugged. Sarah kept glancing at Jason. Jason kept giving tiny nods, like they were launching a missile. Finally, Sarah cleared her throat. "Dad, we wanted to talk about something." Here we go. Whenever somebody says they want to talk about something, they already know exactly what they want. You're the only one entering the conversation unarmed. "What something?" I asked. Jason smiled. "The honeymoon." "Ah, the honeymoon. That magical period when adults convince themselves spending absurd amounts of money is somehow responsible. We found an amazing package. Of course they did. Nobody ever finds a moderately priced package. Nobody bursts through a door screaming, "Good news!" We discovered reasonable financial decisions. Sarah slid a brochure toward me. I picked it up, looked at the destination. Beautiful. Looked at the photos. Beautiful. Looked at the price. I almost swallowed my tongue. $65,000. For a honeymoon. $65,000. For people who were already getting married, not escaping a war zone. Not buying a house. Not funding cancer research. A vacation. I checked again. Still $65,000. I briefly wondered whether the package included ownership of the island. Apparently not. "Dad," Sarah said carefully, "we were hoping you could help." Help. What a flexible little word. Help can mean moving a couch. Help can mean donating a kidney. Today it apparently meant financing tropical luxury. "How much help?" I asked. Jason leaned forward. "The full amount." I laughed. I genuinely thought he was joking. He wasn't. The laughter died alone. An embarrassing death. The room got quiet. "You want $65,000? Sarah nodded. Jason nodded. Nobody seemed concerned that this sounded insane. Interesting. Very interesting. I took a sip of coffee. Needed time. Needed patience. Needed stronger coffee. Finally, I said no. Jason blinked. Sarah blinked. I almost expected a Windows restart sound. Apparently, this outcome hadn't been considered. Sarah recovered first. "Well, what would you be willing to contribute? A wedding gift?" "Yes, $10,000. A generous amount. An objectively generous amount. Enough money to make younger Thomas faint." Sarah looked offended. Offended. I was offering $10,000 and somehow became the villain. Amazing. Human beings are fascinating. Give someone nothing and they're disappointed. Give them $10,000 and they're insulted. Jason's smile started cracking around the edges. We were hoping for more. I'm sure you were. Dad! No, Sarah, let's be honest. You weren't hoping for help. You were hoping I'd pay for it. Her face tightened. Jason stepped in immediately. Smooth, polished, practiced. Thomas, you're financially secure. Translation: we know exactly how much money you have. I hate that translation. I really do. It's amazing how quickly other people develop plans for your retirement. I am secure, I said. Then why not help your family? There it was. The guilt road always arrives earlier than expected, like mosquitoes. Because being secure doesn't require me to finance luxury vacations. Sarah folded her arms. The conversation started sliding downhill, fast. Every sentence became sharper, every response colder. Then she said it, the sentence, the one that changed everything. Don't you want your granddaughter to have a better life? Now let's pause for a moment, because this deserves attention. Sarah wasn't pregnant. There was no granddaughter. We had jumped directly into hypothetical emotional blackmail. Olympic-level speed, future child, future guilt, future leverage, packaged and delivered in one sentence. I stared at her, at my daughter, and all I could think was how disappointed Rebecca would have been to hear that argument. Then I answered, calmly. Very calmly, the kind of calm that usually terrifies people more than shouting, then stop building her future on someone else's wallet. Silence, complete silence. Jason looked furious. Sarah looked wounded. Neither looked reflective, which was unfortunate, because reflection would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. A few minutes later, they left. The pastries remained. I threw them into the trash. The pastries were innocent, but they were accessories. The following weeks were ugly. Calls became shorter. Texts became colder. Family conversations felt like hostage negotiations. Then out of nowhere, Sarah called. Her voice sounded different, softer, warmer, almost apologetic. Dad, I think we should have dinner. I listened. She talked about healing, moving forward, being family, repairing relationships. Every word sounded reasonable, too reasonable. That's the problem. When you've lived long enough, you learn that some conversations feel scripted. This felt scripted, a little too polished, a little too convenient, a little too late. Still, I agreed. The dinner was scheduled for the following Friday. After hanging up, I sat alone in my kitchen. The house was quiet. Rebecca's photograph sat on the counter. I stared at it. Then I rubbed my chin. Then I stared some more. Because something felt wrong. Not obviously wrong. Not provably wrong. Just wrong. Like finding a snake in your yard and losing sight of it. Maybe it left. Maybe it didn't. But you're definitely not walking barefoot anymore. And the closer Friday got, the more certain I became of one thing. Sarah wasn't inviting me to dinner to make peace. She was inviting me for something else. The only question was what? Friday arrived. The entire day felt wrong. Not dramatic wrong. Not horror movie violin music wrong. More like finding one cockroach in your kitchen. You don't panic because of the cockroach. You panic because of his relatives. By 6 o'clock, I was driving downtown toward the restaurant. I almost canceled twice. Not because I was afraid, because I hate ambush. And every instinct I had was whispering the same thing. This isn't dinner. This is a meeting pretending to be dinner. Big difference. One involves appetizers. The other involves paperwork. The restaurant was one of those upscale places where every surface looked expensive and nobody ever seemed genuinely relaxed. I gave my name to the hostess. She smiled. Your party is already here. Of course they were. People setting traps are usually punctual. I followed her through the dining room. Then I stopped. Interesting. Very interesting. Sarah was there. Jason was there. And two men I had never seen before were sitting at the table. Both wearing suits. Both carrying leather briefcases. Because apparently we had skipped dinner and gone straight to Law and Order. Jason stood immediately. Thomas! Far too cheerful. Nobody smiles like that unless they're selling timeshares or hiding bodies. I shook hands, sat down, looked at the strangers. Nobody introduced them. That amused me. The confidence was remarkable. Like they'd forgotten. I wasn't legally obligated to participate in my own surprise meeting. Finally, I asked, should I guess who these gentlemen are? Sarah shifted uncomfortably. Jason jumped in. This is Richard, and this is Alan. Both nodded. No last names. Interesting. Mysterious Lawyer 1 and Mysterious Lawyer 2. Excellent start. What do they do? I asked. Jason smiled. They're attorneys. There it was. The moment the mask came off. Not dramatic. Just enough. The entire evening suddenly made sense. The reconciliation. The friendliness. The carefully arranged dinner. Lawyers don't accidentally appear during family healing exercises. I leaned back. That's fascinating. Nobody laughed. Tough crowd. Sarah wouldn't look directly at me. That bothered me more than the lawyers. Because guilt has body language. And I was watching it in real time. Manus arrived. Nobody opened theirs. Another bad sign. Normal people discuss food. These people were treating calamari as a scheduling inconvenience. Richard cleared his throat. Mr. Carter, thank you for meeting with us. There it was. Mr. Carter. Not Dad. Not Thomas. The second lawyers enter a room. Everybody suddenly sounds like they're testifying before Congress. I folded my hands. You're welcome. Jason smiled. We wanted to discuss long-term planning. Long-term planning. Another dangerous phrase, like strategic partnership, or wealth optimization, or artisan mayonnaise. None of those phrases improve anything. They just make bad ideas sound expensive. Richard opened a folder. I noticed Sarah looking at the table, still avoiding eye contact. Interesting. Very interesting. The lawyer began speaking. Retirement, estate planning, asset management, protection, future security, generational wealth. The usual word salad people throw together before attempting to crawl into your bank account. I listened quietly, very quietly, because silence is useful. People reveal a lot when they think you're confused. The presentation continued. Apparently, they had developed a wonderful structure. A family trust, shared oversight, investment authority, various protections, layers of safeguards. Safeguards always sound wonderful until you identify who benefits from them. Then things become educational. After 15 minutes, I finally asked a question. Who controls this trust? Brief pause, tiny pause. But enough, Jason answered first. Bad sign. Very bad sign. The person benefiting should never be the fastest person answering. There would be shared decision-making. Shared. Another dangerous word. Communism sounded shared too. I looked at Richard. Specifically, Richard adjusted his glasses. The proposed structure would allow Sarah and Jason to serve as co-trustees alongside certain advisory authorities. Translation. Lots of words. Very little oxygen. I turned toward him. Would they have authority over investment decisions under certain circumstances? Would they have access to funds? Potentially. There it is. The table became quiet. Jason laughed nervously. You make it sound bad. No, I make it sound accurate. Sarah finally looked up. Dad, nobody is trying to take your money. I looked at the stack of legal documents, then at the lawyers, then at Jason, then back at Sarah. The entire situation answered itself. Meanwhile, my phone vibrated once in my pocket. Just once. I didn't look. Didn't need to, because I knew exactly who it was. Jeremy. Right on schedule. Earlier that week, I had called him, not because I needed permission, because I trusted him, and because emergency room doctors develop useful instincts, particularly regarding disasters. Dad, he'd said over the phone, something smells off. I know. What are you doing? Going to dinner. Alone? I smiled, remembering his reaction. The silence had lasted 3 full seconds. Then, absolutely not. Dramatic. No, sensible. Dramatic. Dad! Jeremy. Finally, he sighed. What do you need? Now, sitting in that restaurant, I remembered my answer. I need information, because information wins fights. Not emotions. Not outrage. Information. And while Jason had spent weeks preparing his presentation, I'd spent weeks preparing something else. Richard slid documents toward me. These are preliminary drafts. I didn't touch them. Never touch surprise paperwork. That's a life rule. Right next to don't pet strange snakes. And don't trust people who use the phrase passive income excessively. Jason leaned forward. Nobody expects you to sign tonight, which immediately told me somebody expected me to sign tonight. Sarah finally spoke. We just want what's best for everyone. There was genuine emotion in her voice. That was the worst part, because I could see she actually believed some of this. Not all of it, but enough. Jason had become very good at translating self-interest into family language. A dangerous talent. I looked directly at her. Did you read every page? She hesitated. 1 second. 2 seconds. Then, most of it. Ah, there it is. The 4 most expensive words in modern history. Most of it. Jason jumped in immediately. That's not fair. No? No. Then answer for her. Did she read all of it? His jaw tightened. The lawyers suddenly looked uncomfortable. Excellent. I enjoy uncomfortable lawyers when they're not my lawyers, especially when they're realizing the target isn't cooperating. Richard cleared his throat again. Mr. Carter, perhaps we're getting distracted. No, I said. I think we're finally getting focused. Silence. Then my phone vibrated a second time. I glanced down. 1 message from Jeremy. Just 3 words. Got it confirmed. I felt something settle inside me. A piece of a puzzle clicking into place. Interesting timing. Very interesting timing. I slipped the phone away. Jason noticed. His confidence remained intact. For now. Then I finally picked up the top document. Not to read it, just to look at the cover page. And there, printed near the bottom, was a company name. A company I recognized immediately. Not because of the trust paperwork, because Jeremy had spent the last 48 hours investigating it. I looked up slowly. At Jason. At the lawyers. At Sarah. Then back at the document, and suddenly I understood exactly why they were moving so fast. This wasn't about future planning. It wasn't about family security. It wasn't even primarily about my retirement. It was about a financial problem. A very specific financial problem. One that Jason had desperately hoped I wouldn't discover. The problem was that the company connected to these documents was already drowning in debt. And according to Jeremy's message, Jason wasn't just involved with it. He was personally guaranteeing part of it, which meant if things collapsed, someone was going to need a very large amount of money. Very quickly, I looked directly into Jason's eyes. For the first time all evening, his smile wavered. Just slightly, just enough. And that's when I realized something that made my pulse quicken. This wasn't an ambush anymore, because Jason had no idea the battlefield had already changed. And he definitely had no idea who was about to walk through the restaurant doors. The restaurant doors opened. Jason didn't notice. Sarah didn't notice. The lawyers noticed. Lawyers notice entrances the way deer notice gunshots. Their heads turned first. Then everyone else followed. Jeremy walked in. Behind him was Maggie Lawson. And suddenly the atmosphere around our table changed from family discussion to Industrial accident. Now let me explain something about Maggie. Some attorneys look intimidating. Maggie looked disappointed, which was worse. She was in her late 60s, silver hair, perfect posture, expression permanently set to, I've already heard your excuse and I don't believe it. She carried a thin leather folder. That was it. No dramatic briefcase. No stack of documents. Just one folder. The legal equivalent of a loaded revolver. Jeremy arrived first. Dad! Jeremy. He looked at Jason. Jason looked back. Neither smiled. I was proud of both of them. Maggie took the empty chair beside me. Good evening. One of Jason's attorneys immediately straightened. Interesting. Very interesting. Recognition. Not panic. Not yet, but recognition. Like a student unexpectedly discovering the final exam has arrived early. Jason blinked. I'm sorry, who are you? Maggie smiled, the kind of smile sharks might use. Maggie Lawson. The reaction was immediate. Richard's face changed. Alan's face changed. Jason's didn't, because Jason had no idea who she was. The attorneys did. That was enough. Maggie folded her hands. Please continue. Nobody continued. The silence became awkward enough to qualify as furniture. Finally, Jason laughed. Forced. Thin. We were just discussing family planning. Financial planning, I corrected. Same thing. No, not remotely. Jeremy sat back, crossed his arms, watching, waiting. I've seen him in emergency rooms before. Not working, just visiting. The man has a particular look when he thinks someone is about to make a terrible decision. Jason was receiving that look. Maggie reached for the trust documents, flipped pages, read quietly. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Nobody spoke. Then she looked up. Oh, just oh. One syllable. Somehow devastating. Jason shifted. What? Maggie looked at him. Did you draft this? No. Good. Another silence. Longer this time. Jeremy looked down to hide a smile. I wasn't bothering to hide mine. Maggie turned another page, then another. Then she placed the documents down, carefully, like they might stain her hands. This is aggressively inappropriate. Richard immediately jumped in. I disagree. Of course you do. I do. You're being paid. Direct hit. No survivors. Sarah looked increasingly confused, which made sense. For weeks she'd been hearing one version of events. Now reality had arrived carrying paperwork. Maggie turned toward her. Sarah, have you reviewed the beneficiary modifications? Sarah blinked. The what? There it was, that tiny crack. The first real crack. Richard immediately spoke. Those provisions weren't finalized. Maggie ignored him. Good. Experts know when somebody isn't worth arguing with. Sarah, she repeated calmly, did anyone explain how those modifications affect your father's direct control over assets? No, Jason answered instead, because that's not what's happening. Maggie slowly turned toward him. I actually felt sorry for him, briefly. The way you might feel sorry for a squirrel standing in front of a truck. Not enough to stop what's coming, just enough to acknowledge the situation. Mr. Jason, Maggie said. Yes? Please stop talking. Dead silence. Beautiful. Magnificent. Art. Jason's face turned red. Jeremy stared at the ceiling. I knew exactly why. Because if he looked directly at me, we'd both start laughing. And this situation deserved dignity, at least a little. Sarah finally looked at me. Dad, what is happening? I answered honestly. The same thing I've been trying to figure out. She turned toward Jason. He immediately switched gears. Charm mode, comfort mode, damage control mode. All versions of the same software. Sarah, don't let this become something it isn't. Maggie opened her folder. No need. And then she placed several printed documents on the table. The first real bomb. The room got quiet. Very quiet. Jason saw the company name. The same company tied to the trust proposal. His face changed. Not dramatic, but enough. Enough for me. Enough for Jeremy. Enough for Maggie. Enough for anyone paying attention. Sarah looked between them. What is that? Nobody answered immediately, which is never good. Good news travels at the speed of sound. Bad news arrives wrapped in silence. Maggie finally spoke. These are public filings. Jason swallowed. Tiny movement. Huge meaning. Sarah looked confused. What filings? Debt filings. Jason jumped in. They're completely normal. Maggie ignored him again. Second time. Possibly my favorite hobby of the evening. The company is carrying significantly more liability. Then reported to several investors. Sarah frowned. What does that mean? It means the numbers are worse than the sales pitch. Jeremy finally joined the conversation. First words all evening. Much worse. Jason looked furious. You investigated me? Jeremy shrugged. You tried to get control over my father's finances. Reasonable point. Very difficult to argue with. Jason tried anyway, because Jason could probably argue with gravity. Sarah looked at him, then at the papers, then back at him. Jason? For the first time all evening, uncertainty entered her voice. Not anger, not frustration, uncertainty. The beginning of dangerous questions. Jason launched into explanations. Market conditions, temporary leverage, investment timing. Liquidity issues, opportunity cycles, corporate restructuring. I listened. It was genuinely impressive. 20 straight sentences without answering a single question. That's talent. You have to respect craftsmanship. Sarah eventually interrupted. Are you in debt? Silence. Then, everybody has debt. Wrong answer. You could feel it. Actually feel it. The air changed. Sarah knew it too. Jason? More silence. Then, some. Not good. How much? More silence. Even worse. My stomach dropped. Not because of Jason. Because of Sarah. I was watching the exact moment reality began tearing through years of rationalization, and it hurt. No matter how angry I'd been, no matter how frustrated, she was still my daughter. Then Jeremy delivered the next blow, not cruelly, just directly, like a surgeon. Tell her about the personal guarantees. Jason's head snapped toward him. There it is. Bullseye. Sarah looked confused. The what? Nobody answered. Sarah looked at Jason again. What personal guarantees? And there it was. The question. The one he clearly hadn't wanted asked. The one he definitely hadn't wanted answered. Finally, Jason spoke. They're temporary. Not an answer. Sarah knew it. Everyone knew it. How much? His shoulders sagged. Just slightly. Then he named the number. The entire table froze. Sarah looked like she'd been slapped. I won't repeat the amount. Let's just say it was large enough to make a financially responsible person physically uncomfortable, which explained everything. The honeymoon, the trust, the urgency, the pressure, the constant need for access. It all connected. Not one giant conspiracy. Something more common, more pathetic. A man sinking slowly who believed someone else's life raft belonged to him. Sarah stared at him. I didn't know. Jason reached for her hand. She pulled hers back. The movement was tiny. The consequences were enormous. Nobody spoke for nearly 20 seconds. Then Sarah looked at me, actually looked at me. And for the first time in months, I saw something familiar. Not entitlement, not defensiveness, not anger, fear. Real fear. Dad, her voice cracked. Just a little. Then she turned toward Jason and asked the question that shattered whatever remained of the evening. How much of our future have you already promised away? Jason didn't answer immediately. That was answer enough. The drive home from the restaurant was one of the quietest drives of my life. Not because I was angry. That part was over. I was tired. Tired in the way only family can make you tired. The next few months were ugly. Not dramatic, not explosive, just ugly. The kind of slow motion collapse that happens when reality finally catches up with somebody. Sarah moved out of the apartment she shared with Jason for several weeks. Jason bounced between apologies, explanations, promises, and increasingly desperate business ideas. Every phone call seemed to feature a new plan, a new investor, a new opportunity, a new breakthrough. The problem was that every breakthrough looked suspiciously similar to the previous disaster. Meanwhile, Maggie continued digging. The deeper she looked, the worse things became. Nothing criminal, nothing that would lead to handcuffs, just years of reckless decisions. Loans supporting loans, debt supporting debt, appearance supporting reality. A financial Jenga tower built by a man convinced gravity was negotiable. Eventually, the company failed. Then another investment failed. Then a property deal collapsed. The dominoes started falling. Once they started, they never stopped. Jason spent years building an image. Turns out images don't pay creditors. Sarah called me often during that period. At first, she mostly cried. Then she mostly listened. Then she started asking questions she should have asked years earlier. Questions about money, budgets, planning, reality. I answered every one of them, not because she'd earned forgiveness, because she was my daughter. Those are different things. One afternoon, she sat across from me at my kitchen table. The same table where the honeymoon argument had happened. The same table where everything started. She looked exhausted. Dad! Yeah? I think I knew. I looked up. Knew what? Not everything. She stared into her coffee. But enough. The honesty surprised me. She laughed bitterly. I kept telling myself things would work out. Most people do. I thought success was right around the corner. That's because somebody kept selling you maps. That earned a small smile. The first genuine smile I'd seen from her in months. A few weeks later, she ended the engagement. No screaming. No dramatic confrontation. Just finished. Done. A relationship can survive many things. Trust usually isn't one of them. 6 months after that, my granddaughter was born. Emily. Tiny. Loud. Absolutely furious about being introduced to existence. I liked her immediately. The first time I held her, she grabbed my finger and refused to let go. I was finished after that. Completely finished. Grandfathers don't stand a chance. Sarah became a different person after Emily arrived. Not perfect, just different. Real responsibilities have a way of clearing fog. Diapers don't care about luxury lifestyles. Formula doesn't care about personal branding. A crying baby at 3 in the morning is one of nature's most effective reality programs. Jason tried returning several times. Not to Sarah, to me. That was the funny part. Calls, emails, messages, always polite, always friendly, always attached to some opportunity. I ignored them all. My retirement remained exactly where it belonged. Mine. The years passed, slowly, peacefully, the way I liked them. Sarah rebuilt, not overnight, one decision at a time. Jeremy remained Jeremy, which meant he continued viewing Jason with the warmth normally reserved for food poisoning. Some things never change. One spring afternoon, nearly 4 years after the restaurant incident, the whole family gathered in my backyard. Emily was chasing Bubble. Jeremy was manning the grill. Sarah was laughing at something her daughter had said. For a moment, I found myself looking toward the empty chair where Rebecca would have been sitting. I still did that sometimes. Probably always would. Sarah walked over and sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for a while. Emily ran past wearing butterfly wings and carrying half a hot dog. A completely normal child. which somehow felt miraculous. Finally, Sarah said quietly, "You saved me." I shook my head. "No." She looked at me. "You did." "No, Sarah." I watched Emily race across the yard. "You saved yourself." She was quiet for several seconds. Then she nodded. Maybe she finally understood. Maybe not. Either way, it didn't matter anymore. The sun was setting. The grill was smoking. My granddaughter was attempting to negotiate with a squirrel, a negotiation she was losing badly. Some family traditions survive every generation. I leaned back in my chair. For the first time in a long time, nobody wanted anything from me. Nobody needed a signature. Nobody had documents. Nobody had a scheme. Just family. Imperfect family, but real. And after everything that had happened, that was more than enough. The squirrel stole a piece of Emily's hot dog. She gasped in outrage. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my drink. And for the first time in years, the sound felt exactly like home.